Now, we can see a need of change of business model because, again, here the industry also lost because the court says that the industry, the advertisers, the newspaper don't have copy IP rights in the advertisement, so they even lost in court. But they still can claim and do claim that in contracts, what we talked about also in the morning, that maybe they can do it through contracts. Put in the site kind of a notice saying everybody who uses this site is using it, provided he's not going to crop or copy or do anything with the ads. I'm not sure it's possible to do it legally, to put in more IP rights or put in contracts for kind of IP rights where IP rights were decided that you don't have them by the courts. But still, I think the way, even if you lose in court and even if you win in court, you have to go to a different business model regarding ads as well. The third example is streaming. And it's, again, a new technology that the laws, the current IP laws didn't think about. It's mainly television, satellite broadcast. The question is if it does infringe copyright. The broadcast is only viewed on air. It's not copied or not set in any computer. Now, different laws define holder rights differently. Some have a very general definition, any communication to the public, and that streaming may be inside IP. Other places, like I think in the Israeli law, others think that Israeli law can be interpreted to include it. But again, you have it. And let's say the Supreme Court will decide that streaming is not allowed. Okay, so this specific site will be closed down. But you have like thousands of others that do exactly the same and broadcast on the internet sport events that are streamed to and presented on the net. So again, you can win the cases in court, but I don't think you can do it in the business. Another way of trying to win in court when you don't have IP rights, when the court says you don't have IP rights, is unjust enrichment, which is a very big subject in Israel. And when the court says there is no IP right, no IP infringement, then you go to check if there is unjust enrichment. For example, cropping of ads I talked about before was decided not to be infringement, but then you should go and check if it is unjust enrichment. Somebody collected the ads and somebody else is now putting them on his or her site and generating money out of it. In the ads context, in Israel there is a debate whether unjust enrichment or unfair competition can be held. There was a very famous Israeli Supreme Court case that held that in extreme circumstances one could get restitution in unjust enrichment even if you don't have IP rights. But again, I think that even if you win there, even if you win on one level, on the IP themselves or on unjust enrichment, you have still a problem in the market. And now I want to go and talk a minute about IP rights versus user rights. One of the subjects that is often discussed today is the question of the balance between the rights of the IP owners on the one hand and of the public or users on the other. Public domain and IP rights. When we talk about books, we talk mainly about copyright and the right to fair use. But the thing I say are applicable also to trademarks and other IP rights, as I said in the beginning. The digital revolution and the internet have changed our lives. It is easier to reach works, to distribute works. We talked about all of those aspects regarding to books before. It is easier to participate in the public discourse. It is also easier to copy works. This change necessitates new balances that will take into account the right of the public to consume culture and to participate in the public discourse, which include reading books, watching films, listening to music, watching sport events, and so on, so that the copyright owner right will not negate these advantages of the new age. We should allow different business models to allow fair use and let the public enjoy the advantages of the new era. When making a decision, one must weigh the questions that touch upon the rights of users in the digital age. The user rights to fair use, the rights to participate in the culture. Whether it is possible to restrict users from viewing culture on the internet, and finally, whether under pressure from the publishers of books, movies, music, and sport industry, we do not cause excessive harm to the public domain and to the users. What is the correct balance between property rights and of cultural products and the rights of the public in respect of those same cultural products? We should remember that this question encompasses a great deal and touch upon everybody who uses digital media and the internet, including the use of cellular telephone. Today we can download books and read them on our cellular telephone. All those instruments that store books, movies, musical files, and many other everyday activity. So we need the new balances. And this question is has to be faced by the legislator, of course, by the courts. But I think the business models that people should be thinking about are business models that would facilitate and would make available to the public of most of the works, of course, getting something back for the author, but we should go to the author. And I think the big industries, if they still want to make money, should take this into account, and I think iTunes is a good example of it. I want to just read you something about the importance of the fair use. The balance is mainly needed between the need to create a suitable incentive for creation by granting economic rights to the work and the need to let the public use the work for the advancement of culture and information. All that while maintaining freedom of expression and freedom of creation and assuring free and fair competition. And then it's a Canadian judgment. The fair dealing exception is perhaps more properly understood as an internal part of the Copyright Act and simply as a defense. Any act falling within the fair dealing exception will not be an infringement of copyright. The fair dealing, like other exception, is a user right. In order to maintain the proper balance between the right of copyright owner and user's interest, this must not be interpreted restrictively. And I want to also quote Lawrence Lessing regarding that, which said, these modern day equivalent of the early 20th century radio and 19th century railroads are using their power to protect them against this new, more efficient, more vibrant technology for building culture. But those simple beliefs mask a much more fundamental question. My fear is that unless we come to see this change, the war to rid the world of internet pirates will also rid our culture of values that have been integral to our tradition from the start. And we should pay attention who is fighting those fights. It's not the authors, usually, it's the big mass production companies, and we have to remember that when deciding upon this balance. And the last question I want to touch on is the question of enforcement. The main reason I believe that the market will decide on the new balance and new business models and not the court is the enforcement problem. First of all, there is the jurisdiction problem, which I'll not touch upon, which is also a great problem. Who is going to decide? The court. Where? Where the site is, where the computer is, where the owner is, where it is, where you can see the site from, or all of them, or none of them. But let's say we decide who has the jurisdiction. The net is boundaryless. In the light of this fact, complicated question of enforcement arises. Usually, or today, there are a lot of countries where you don't have any enforcement of IP laws, where sites that are infringing IP laws are set. You cannot touch them, you cannot do anything with them. And the problem is of enforcement that, let's say you did find some site and you did decide to shut it down, like they did with Napster. So they'll open it a day later in another country, and other than shutting down the internet altogether or doing kind of what they do in China, you actually cannot enforce it. So actually, it's very easy to infringe. It's very easy to copy. There are a lot of anonymous programs that you can stay anonymous, and it's very hard to get the people who do it. And as the music example shows, they did get those sites, and those sites were shut down. In those cases, other techniques were put up on the air. But in our days, you can just change the place where you put the site, and it costs nothing. It takes no time. So you can't really fight it. And if I'll take the example of streaming, there are tens of thousands of sites that do it on the net. So let's say you take this one case and you say, okay, we're shutting down this site. Okay, so you have other tens of thousands of sites that do it. So the sports industry should do what the music industry is doing. Again, sell it for very low sums of money so people can buy it. And the iTunes model shows that people do not want to cheat, do not want to steal. If they can pay small sum of money, they do it. They do buy. These new business models do work. And I think the law, the courts, and the big industry should head this way, to let more information be on the net for a lot of people, for affordable prices. And I think the same goes as for books. Again, if we take all those ways, now you can buy electronic books for smaller sums of money. This is the direction we should go. And we should be careful. Because in an inquisitive society, the drive for monopoly advantage is a very powerful pressure. Unchecked, it would no doubt patent the wheel, copyright the alphabet, and register the sun and the moon as exclusive trademarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Michal. Our next speaker will talk about technological aspects of digitization. There are a number of views on digitization, and for instance, some have argued that the efforts that Google has made somewhat resemble a natural monopoly, that is such a enormous expenditure has been made, we should not oblige or expect other companies to make a similar investment, that would be wasteful, and that we maybe perhaps should think of the settlement and things as a project that would, is akin to an essential facilities, and that we should open access. And so some people have that view. Others have a very different opinion on digitizations and have a sense that, share a sense that these projects, we should stimulate additional investments as much as possible, or wait for them to foster because they offer alternative ways of scanning, improved ways perhaps, and so that we are just at the start of a new era. And so those are very different views, and I think it'd be very helpful as we have scheduled in today here is to hear a little more about the technological aspects of digitization. And for that purpose, Mr. Asaf Tzadok is is with us here today, and he will discuss with us a exciting project, concert, which is based on the Impact project. And so at least we've talked a lot about Google, and to also prevent monopolization of the forum here today, we'll also talk a little bit about IBM now.
טכנולוגיה. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Asaf Tzadok. I come from the My name is Asaf Tzadok. I come from the IBM Research Lab in Haifa. It's located over here, not so far away from here. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Concert. Is our collaborative correction tool, which incorporates several technologies. As it was said before, it's a part of Impact. I will give you a little bit information about the project later. So a little introduction. We're talking about a huge amount of books that we have now waiting for digitization. In a process of digitization, there are several technologies involved. There are scanning, there are OCR, and there is post-processing. More or less, the estimate in our project is about €1 per A5 page for full digitization, which will make it available as initial transcription for an ebook. It's a lot of money. So we know that today libraries have some cuts in their budgets, so most of them go to Google, and hopefully they get some digitization done there. As part of this challenge of mass digitization, libraries across Europe have begun thinking about conducting a project specifically to lower the cost of digitization. Leading libraries such as the British Library here, Ali represented the Impact yesterday. There are also the coordinator from the Netherlands. There are also leading companies, IBM, of course, and EBI, which is, as far as we estimate, the #1 OCR, Omni OCR technology that is available today. There is also universities and some research institution which does lower a number of work here in the project, but mainly it's is the companies and the libraries themselves. So this is the right time to tell you that we have in October an impact conference, which you can talk to Ali about it. It will be hosted by the British Library, and will summarize all the output of impact, including additional tools for digitization. Okay, so one way to reduce the cost of digitization is to go to the crowd and to use the crowd power to have a full digitization of your content. It has begun with Gutenberg project, was mentioned before, with proofreaders involved. Then comes the project, which is slightly more involved, the Austrian newspaper digitization, also LDS Church, which involves a lot of, they have a lot of volunteers, religious volunteers, who contribute to the project. It seems that there are a very wide participation of volunteers. If you think about it, no company can compete with such a huge number of volunteers. So that's the direction we went to. So, sorry. This is how it looks like. This is the first generation of crowdsourcing platform. It's a side-by-side application that you download to your desktop. You download the data, and then you have, from one hand, you have the original image, and then on the right-hand side, you have the textual representation of the transcription of the OCR. The user is requested to go through the data, the left to the right and left to the right until it gets tired, and hopefully to find errors and to find missing words and to add. This is the first generation crowdsourcing platform. Then comes the Australian newspaper, which is slightly more evolved. In this case, it's not an application that you install on your desktop. It's just like connecting to the website of the Australian newspaper official website. And then you have more sophisticated application when you have a cropping of a paragraph or of an article that you are requested to look and proof it. But more or less they are the same concept, side-by-side application, which is including a lot of labor, and it's we think that it's a little bit problematic for digitization. So what we have state-of-art solutions, which are simply side-by-side. We think that it's a slow and productive process, and it's also prone to errors. You need to have double check. It's not easy to double check because if you send two articles to two different people, how can you merge between them? It's too complex to do any kind of job. Just think about WinDiff, or anybody used any Beyond Compare or something. It's something that's very sophisticated. So it's also additional work to do the merging as well. So how does it work? If we go and we ask the volunteers to go and help us do the crowdsourcing, we need to have a full web-based application, so it will be very convenient, very accessible. It should be also very intuitive to the users. You may also add in your website, if you are a library, to have some kind of call for participation. It can be on a collection base, like say a specific writer or a specific period of time. And also have some kind of incentives to the volunteers. You can think about incentives such as top performer lists, library recognition award. You would think about anything you like, even acknowledgement in the ebook, to have your name in the ebook. So that's something that's very convincing, to have your name for life, for eternity. So we bring concert. What is concert? Concert is the new type of crowdsourcing platform. It's completely different than the other platform because it's totally connected to the adaptive system, to the adaptive OCR system. It's not a key-in application by definition. That means the thing is not static. The behavior of the application is different, will be different by time. It will be improve itself constantly. It has a strong emphasis on productivity tools, which is also improve the motivation of the volunteers and also accelerate the workload, minimize the workload, and allow us to have full digitization quite rapidly. We also do, let's say, we break down the full content, the full job into sub-jobs, to subtasks. And all these subtasks, we have a specific application for each task. And there is also online compilation, which is more like backend. And also all this concept is fully parallel. So that means that if we would like to accelerate specific collection to being digitized, we can say, okay, even in one book, there can be 50 people working on the same book at the same time and finish it in 1 minute. So it's that's the thing. It's not exactly 1 minute because it's also including some kind of additional work in a page level. But in general, it's very fast operation. It's a little snapshot on our architecture. If you look at it, we start with a scanned book. So one of the requirements is the scanning will be done on the library side. Then you may do some kind of unique image enhancement per collection. You would think about millions of enhancements. Page distortion collection, binarization, whatever, you just name it. Then it goes to Omni OCR. In our case, the Omni OCR that we use is ABI. That means it's very good in layout analysis, binarization, and something like that. It may not be as good as we want for the OCR work, but this is why we have the adaptive OCR engine. So we do some kind of logic that extracts high confidence characters. Then we have the clustering, auto training, and goes through the collaborative correction platform, get the feedback from the users, and then enhance the results. And at the end of the process, we get the high quality results. That's the, if I would summarize what, one of the major gaps that this platform allows is that is the adaptive OCR. What is OCR? OCR, you take a character, first of all, you take a page, you break it down to columns, you break it down to paragraphs, then you go to lines. Each line breaks down into words, and each word breaks down into characters. The OCR engine, the whole logic is how to understand what it is, what this figure is. You see here 3 figures on the left-hand side, and then you see the 4th one, which is artificial. There are lots of variation of characters. This is why the OCR engines does not produce high-quality results. The problem is with the Omni concept. What is the Omni concept? That means we know all major fonts, but we don't know the newer fonts, the variations of the font. We don't know whether it went to a specific scareness which does some kind of distortion. This is where the OCR breaks down. We break the equation here. We say that we take a different approach that the conventional OCR does, which goes and do feature extraction and recognition. We go and work on a bitmap level, which allows us do some very nice stuff. So this is automatic creation after the user said to us that this is an F, and this is an F, and this is an F. We didn't know the F before that. The engine does not know how F looks like. doesn't know anything. It just starts from scratch, just like fitting it, this is an F. And it does their unsupervised learning, which is very sophisticated, and produce automatically the ideal representation of F. Then it goes to an engine which does the distortion correction, because since we talked about that the page may be distorted, every character is distorted. So maybe a minimum of distortion, maybe something bigger, but there is distortion there. So in the middle you see the distortion, the distorted character. There's no chance that any OCR will be able to read it. On the left-hand side, you see the reference. That means that the reference that we produce, if you remember before, we produce a very nice-looking character which represents the ideal M. And then on the right-hand side, you see the dewarped image. That means that we found what it is, and we validate that this is actually an M. This is a very sophisticated approach, which is very problematic in terms of processing power, but we have created very nice solution for acceleration of this process. This is an example of two characters which there is no chance in the world that the OCR, the conventional OCR, will do it automatically without any supervision. What do you have here? You have two characters which splits within there is only one knob there that's distinguished between Gothic S to F. The biggest issues that we have, one of the biggest issues that we have in the project is just to optimize for all variation of Gothic fonts to have the ability to distinguish between F and S in the Omni OCR engine. We do not care about it. So you have it automatically. This is a very sophisticated way for the hybrid approach for the recognition. This is the technology side that processes automatically and adapts itself. Now we get to the application itself. We have a system flow where we begin with different type of sessions. We have, since I don't have too much time now, so I just drop to the slide itself. So this is, we call it a character session, a carpet. We use the human ability to detect a change in the texture. So we are very good in it. So you can easily find that there is one error here. So if you would go and read all the page, you wouldn't realize this a very little change. But if you put all of them together, it's very easy to locate. That's only one thing to go. But we also have some kind of error injection here. So we put an error here deliberately. So we checked the user alertness, whether he knows the job, whether he does the job well. So he will be able to do the job right. And we can count on it as a web user to be able to do the job. That's another example for character session. We have also a different approach when we cannot decide on a character level. Sometimes the segmentation fails, sometimes it's not very clear what it is. We go to the word level. Then we have here a set of features which allows the user to choose one of the spellings here. We group words together. This is before and this is after. You just accept what it is for the verification, or you just choose one of the options as the spelling, or you just override it. Sorry. And this is an example how you group all of them together because they all have the same error. You see here, it's not actually it's not a T, it's a Z, but it consistently does the same error again and again, and we validate it, and in one go we just do the job and fix it. Then comes the page session, which has a set of views. You have you can go and see it on a word level. You can see and look at it on a line level, and also a paragraph, and also some tagging to be added here. It has some sophisticated navigation technologies and some layout operations. Whoever is interested, I will be more than happy to share with. Here is an example for a different kind of input, for index cards for Hearst and user collection. And now we go and just give you a little status update. We have the Hearst archive collection is on production, the use of this platform. We had a pilot with Japanese national libraries, and we didn't get the project because they had the incident lately, so we postponed the effort for next year. But it was a very successful pilot. And we have also the first phase of the pilots with the major libraries in Europe. We had the KB, the library of the British Library, the BSB, and the ONB, which in these days we are collecting, we are aggregating all the feedback, and hopefully we'll get to a place where we'll be able to answer all the requirements. We did some evaluation of the approach. Actually, here we just talk about 50% of productivity improvements, but it's mainly because the loop of the adaptivity was not implemented, was implemented only partly, but at the moment we have 50% of improvement on well-segmented characters, and if we have segmentation, so it's a very big load on a page session where it's a lot slower than the regular process. But keep in mind that in this case, as opposed to regular digitization, we get it on a word level. That means that you know the location of the word, so you will be able to reproduce an ebook at the end. So it's a different situation. So I think now I will thank you, Guy. I was okay with the timing. You may continue.
Let me give you a hand. Yep. Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Professor James Grimmelman. Professor Grimmelman teaches at New York University, New York Law School, sorry, New York Law School. Important difference. And he is a frequent commentator on many issues relating to